that the sun shines down its power to all the world and makes the wind blow strong as it will. I wonder hope gentle rains can fall upon the land, so lovely earth can stay lovely still. Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back for Energy Week with George Harvey and Tom Finnell. This is Tom Finnell.
Hello.
I'm George Harvey, believe it or not. And what I do is I get up every morning at about 3:30 or 4:30 and spend the next 3 or 4 hours analyzing news relating to energy and global warming for a blog called geoharvey.wordpress.com. And I write for Green Energy Times, and I assemble what I have come up with in the previous week, the things that I think are the most interesting, and then Tom and I sit and talk about them. And Tom is privy to all the things that I'm putting into my blog, so he brings in pictures.
Well, yeah, I read your blog religiously. I kind of have to. And if there's something interesting by way of an image or something I particularly want to comment on, I make a copy of it.
Right.
I'll bring them up from time to time as we talk.
Well,
I also play with this mouse, which controls the cameras.
yes.
So if I sometimes look like a deer in the headlights, I'm actually trying to figure out which camera to turn on.
Yeah, you'd be surprised how complicated all this is. But on the other hand, you might be surprised how easy it is, too. I mean, the BCTV has made it very easy for us to have
Well,
this
to
show.
show you the magic I can perform, I'm going to bring up a picture of George.
Picture of George. Yes, there's a picture of George. Hi, folks. Okay. I think we should get going. Our first entry comes from last Friday, which is the 16th of May. And this was something that we talked about last time. The collaborative commons is the first new economic paradigm to take root since the advent of capitalism and socialism. The collaborative commons is already transforming the way we organize economic life with profound implications for the future of the market. Now that was from Market Watch, which is a Wall Street Journal.
This is a biggie.
This is big.
This is
and
a biggie.
The real thing that I wanted to come to here was when you read the Wall Street Journal, you don't always get a real firm grasp of what's going on from the point of view of the guy on the street. Now, what's happened, just to give you an example of how this works. The first time I worked on a computer, it had core RAM. This is disks, little donuts that were sewn together by people who, it was really, you know, it was
little donuts, yeah.
little
I can
donuts.
picture those things.
Yeah,
Right?
and each bit was sewn in by hand into the memory. The computer cost $1.5 million used, and it had 10 kilobytes of RAM.
And it was how big?
It was the size. It took over a faculty apartment in the university I was going to. It took 3 air conditioners just to cool it.
Cool. Yep.
It had no monitor. It had no keyboard. It had a keyboard that made punch cards that you could put in, and then it had a printer that would print out a result.
And now most of us have cell phones that would put it to shame.
Oh yeah, but the thing is, the memory at that time cost $1 a bit.
Wow.
So 10 kilobytes of memory cost because there's eight bits in a byte. That was $80,000.
Wow.
Now, today you can go into a store and buy a 32 gigabyte card for your camera for what? $15? $16?
Well, I'll give you 16 megabytes anyhow for that price.
The point is that the $1 a bit has gone to a billionth of a dollar.
Yeah,
you know,
I can't even say it.
So
It's
small.
small.
You think about $20. Yeah, that's appreciable money, but it's appreciable money for buying an amount of memory which, if it could have been sold in 1966, would have paid off half the national debt. And really,
and it's just it's astounding to see the progress we've made in it.
Absolutely. Now, just consider solar power for a moment. Solar electricity. When you put in a solar PV, how long does it last?
Well, theoretically, they last 20, 25 years.
No, that's the warranty period.
Oh yeah, they're going to last a lot
Theoretically,
longer than
yeah, theoretically, they gradually degrade.
Yeah.
And the numbers that I'm seeing for 20-year-old panels is that they degrade at a remarkably slow rate. They should be operating at 50% efficiency when they're 100 years old.
Much slower than they actually said they were going to do.
Yes, that's
So
right.
Things don't usually work out.
No, not usually. But the point is, the payoff period for the panels is about 7 to 10 years. And when that 7 to 10 years is by, the only thing that you have to do to keep the panels going is just a little bit of maintenance and replacing an inverter every 10 or 15 years.
Keep the snow off.
Keep the snow off, but it'll melt. But that means the electricity this thing generates is being produced for free.
Absolutely. Once
Okay.
it's paid off, that's
Once
free.
it's paid
There's
off,
no
it's
more.
free. How does the fossil fuel industry compete in a market where you can get free electricity? It doesn't.
It can't.
It can't. So
Let me interject something here because
Yeah.
you've hit on something that I haven't seen anybody writing about.
Yeah.
But let's say that these solar arrays
Yeah.
are projected to last 25 years.
Yeah.
Inside of 25 years, based upon the progress we're making, inside of less than 10, they're going to come up with new panels that are so far superior to the ones you got
Right.
that it's going to make economic sense to replace them.
Yes.
Even though they're still perfectly fine.
And the fact
Which
that
is
they're
going to create a whole secondary market
Yes.
for, let's call it poorer people,
For poorer people.
to buy them
Yes.
at a really low price.
Really low price.
And it's just going to spread.
That's right.
There's something that may come up today about putting in solar in India.
Yeah.
The new premier wants to basically put everybody
Everybody
on
on solar. He wants everybody on
solar. They
solar.
only need 2 light bulbs and a TV set.
Yeah, that's what he wants. 2 light bulbs and a TV set for everybody.
For everybody.
This is a
Chicken
new
in every pot.
That's right. It's a new twist on the chicken
Well,
in every pot.
getting back to what you were saying, because you were going to make a good point there
Yeah.
about the solar.
Well, it's not just the solar, but it's other things too. You buy an electric car, and there are analysts who are saying that the automobile market is going to be dominated by electric cars by 2020. This is not very far away, because the electric cars are now very competitive with gas-driven cars, and so they're saying by 2020 worldwide, the car market is going to be dominated by electric.
if we have the infrastructure to charge them, they will just take off.
That's right. Now, the next thing is electric cars have batteries, and the batteries don't last forever. But when an electric car battery is swapped out, when the car gets a new battery, that old battery is still only about a quarter to a third of the way through its productive life for use of other types of power storage.
Like energy storage.
Like energy storage on the grid, or like energy storage for the home.
At the home.
Which means that within about 20 years, we're going to have a huge aftermarket for batteries that can be used on the grid, that are used batteries. And those batteries are going to be very, very cheap.
So a $2,000 battery is going to be selling for about $200.
Well, you know,
Well, just to pick numbers out of
Yeah,
the
to
air.
pick
You
numbers
can
out
put
of
it
the air,
down in
yeah.
your cellar
Yeah,
and
that's
save
right.
the solar power that you generate during the day.
That's right, which means that whole communities can go off the grid profitably. And of course, in places like Australia, where they're having that huge political fight over whether they're going to go to renewables or whether they're going to extend the life of the coal-burning utilities, and the government is saying we need to develop coal. There are communities that are saying, you know, maybe it makes sense for us to have our own power generation, get off the grid, forget about the utilities and so forth.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That's very, very current right now in Australia.
Absolutely, and it's you know, I think we're going to be seeing exciting times. Should we move on, or is there more?
Why not?
Okay. The Global Sustainability Institute, and I had to look into this and find out that that's actually a part of a university in the UK, has done research indicating Britain has just 5.2 years of oil, 4.5 years of coal, and 3 years of its own gas
I
remaining.
read that. I'm astounded.
Well, the thing that makes me a little astounded about this is the 5.2 and the 4.5. How do they figure that? I'm a little skeptical, and I know that there are a lot of other people who are very skeptical. Nevertheless, this is an important point, because the UK, there's another thing that comes up later in the news about that, and we'll get to it. And it makes me think that actually this may be, although the 5.2 and the 4.5, I'm very skeptical about.
It's still small numbers.
They're still small numbers, and there's still significant problems in the UK, and it's not just the UK. It's really the whole world,
Yeah.
except for Australia has a lot of coal, Russia has a lot of oil and gas, coal, you know, and so there are organizations that want to push fossil fuels. That was in Fresh Business Thinking, and that first item, by the way, I mentioned that it was Market Watch, which is the Wall Street Journal, the item about the collaborative commons. From Business
We'll
Week.
get a chance, we'll go back and visit that, because there's so much in that article.
Oh, just a huge amount, and it keeps coming out. The article came from a guy named Jeremy Rifkin, who wrote a series of what I think are probably going to turn out to be kind of watershed social and economic pieces. These are books.
I know, the guy's been around a long time, writing some good stuff, and nobody knows about him.
Yeah, well,
They will now.
there are a lot of people who do know about him, but you know, I didn't know about him, and I think that nobody that you're talking about is just the guy on the street.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
I'm sure the people in academia know him well.
yeah. I'd be interested in knowing what opinion they have of him, but I have a feeling it's going to be based on their own politics more than anything else. The numbers, the things that the guy is talking about that I'm seeing make sense, and they are not political. This is not a guy who's pushing a socialist agenda or a capitalist agenda. He said, watch for the end of capitalism, because it's going to happen. But the fact is, it's not just capitalism, it's also socialism.
Well, actually, basically, he said it.
Yeah.
He said exactly that.
Yeah. And it means that we're going to be living in a new kind of economy where people are giving things away. And that doesn't sound all that sensible. But you know, you go to WordPress and you say, I want to have a blog. And you can have a blog on WordPress for free. And they allocate 3 gigabytes of memory for your and if you want to have another blog, you can have another. And there's no limit. So I've got a bunch of blogs, and each one of them has got 3 gigabytes of memory allocated to it.
The computer industry is leading the way there.
Yep.
This Linux
Right.
is an operating system.
Yeah,
It's been
absolutely.
free from the beginning.
From the beginning.
And you don't hear much about it, but the Androids will operate on it, and some
Yeah.
even somethings run on it.
Yeah. And-
that one astounded me.
Well,
you know,
and
but
interestingly
it's free.
enough, they're even clones of Linux,
Oh yeah, which are also free.
which are also free. but you know, people like to have their own name on things. So various other organizations have come up and said, yeah, we can do that too. And there are other free operating systems. And
So we're leading toward a gift economy.
we're leading toward a gift economy, yeah, absolutely, in which WordPress has got a reason to give me 3 gigabytes of storage for every blog, because they want to sell me something.
Absolutely.
And the thing that they're going to sell me is not free yet. But you know, that's the thing. You have to keep ahead of the demand so that you're giving people what they want. Okay, next, from Business Week, the Obama administration is considering ways to cut greenhouse gas emissions by as much as 25% by reaching beyond the power plants themselves and encouraging owners to expand to renewable energy, improve grid efficiency, and encourage customers to use less power. And honestly, I read that article and I could not understand the ins and outs of it. So if somebody wants to do it, you can go to the blog. It's the 16th of May, and it's there. But basically what they're saying is they don't want to measure the power plant's emissions. They want to measure the company's emissions. And there are companies that are going to go for that, I think, and there are going to be companies that don't.
Now, these are strictly emissions, or is this the total energy used to produce?
It's the, well, what their goal is to cut greenhouse gas emissions.
Okay.
But I think they're going a bit further
Uh-huh.
than that.
Well, basically, they're going to have to.
Yeah. On the 17th, we have this. Last year, Japan invested more than any other country in solar energy. That was a surprise to me. In 2013, 6.7 gigawatts of solar capacity was approved for the feed-in tariff scheme. Almost half of this was utility scale solar. Now that's interesting because there's a flip side to that, which is over half of it was not utility scale solar.
It all depends on how you use the words, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does.
Yeah, I got a picture here that I'm going to pull up
Okay, good.
about Japan. It's kind of a nice picture. It's a little too bad it's a little bit fuzzy.
Yeah, it says this year it'll be over 10 gigawatts, with more than half of that being utilities. More than half this time being utility scale solar.
It's up there now. Now this is the biggest solar plant in Japan,
Okay,
and that's a volcano in the background.
okay,
And what looks like sea there is solar panels.
yeah,
It stretches right into the salt waters. You can see them at the edge of the East China Sea,
Yeah.
staring at a 1,400 meter high volcano.
Wow.
It's 70 megawatts. It's called Kagoshima, no, not Tsujima.
You sure about that?
No, I'm not. Matter of fact, I'm sure I'm wrong, but
You're just trying hard, that's all.
it's as large as 1.2 million square meters, which is a half of a square mile, which is 313 acres,
Okay,
which is equal to 200 football fields.
yeah,
This is big.
yeah,
This is big.
yeah. Yep. So that's what's going on in Japan. That was from Clean Technica. From The Scotsman, Aberdeen-based Pilot Offshore Renewables aims to moor 8 floating wind turbines 10 miles off the Kincardine coast of Scotland. Kincardine, I'm having trouble reading, not pronouncing. Kincardine coast of Scotland. This would be the world's first floating wind farm. Semi-submersible platforms would cut construction and installation costs.
I'm not sure this is the first, because I think I've read about it before.
We've
They
read
build them
about
in
it
a
before, but I think
Dry dock, they tow them out
Yeah.
to sea, and they anchor them. And
yeah, I think this is the first that actually is a group of them.
something's
Something's
first about
different,
it.
yeah.
Yep.
From Bloomberg BNA, we have this, an energy tax incentive bill which failed to clear a procedural vote in the Senate May 15th may be revived. Largest among the energy tax credits is the extension of the production tax credit of 2.3 cents per kilowatt hour for generating new renewable electric power. And this is something which has been kicking around kicking around Washington since the end of last year, because that tax credit was providing a lot to finance wind and solar and other renewables in the United States, and it was
It's
important.
key, really.
Well, at this point, I'm wondering whether it is, to tell you the
Well,
truth.
you got to get the investors interested.
You do.
And the only way you're going to get them interested is to give them something.
That's right. But I think we are getting to the point where the production tax credit can be decreased.
Eventually,
We have-
eventually maybe nearby.
Yeah.
We're not going to need it.
So I think that we have to, I don't mind giving them the money. It's a whole lot better. If the taxpayer pays this, let me put it this way. Austin, Texas bought solar power, 150 megawatts, at 4.9 cents per kilowatt hour. Now, that was because they could get it with this production tax credit, which was still left over from last year.
Which they in turn can sell.
Right. Now, Austin, if it were buying just solar, would have been paying, without the production tax credit, would have been paying 7.2 cents per kilowatt hour.
Which is still good.
It's still good. And they turned down wind at 2.1 cents per kilowatt hour, which would have been 4.4 cents, which is astonishing. But the cost of gas power would have been 7.1 cents unsupported. And by switching to gas instead of solar, they would have had no way of knowing what the fuel is going to cost in the future. So
Correct,
they might
yeah.
still have gone to solar even if the price was 7.1 or
Well,
7.2.
I think you just said they have no idea what the price of gas is, which is a correct statement.
Yeah.
But I think it's pretty likely that it will be higher.
It's likely, yes. And of course, coal was higher than
Oh,
gas,
yeah.
and nuclear was higher than gas. In fact, both of them were above 10 cents. So, yeah. Next item on the 18th of May, this from RT. Ukrainian police stopped a group of armed men from entering Europe's largest nuclear power plant, located in the southeastern Ukraine. In video footage allegedly showing the attempted break-in, the men say they are members of the Right Sector Group, whatever that is.
Well, they're neo-Nazis is what they are. They are. I mean,
This does
I don't
not
want to get
sound...
into the history of Ukraine, but they have a direct link with Hitler's.
Yeah, the
Occupation.
history of the Ukraine is just
Well,
mind-boggling.
here's a picture of Ukraine's largest nuclear plant. And that's got 5 reactors.
And this is the one that those guys were trying
This
to break
is the one,
into.
yeah.
Wow.
This is the one. I don't have any footage of the guys breaking in, but the power plant authorities said the incident did not affect the station's operations. However, security at the plant throughout Energodar, I guess that's the area, has been heightened.
Yeah, I can believe
Several
that.
cars full of men who introduced themselves as members of the notorious neo-Nazi group Right Sector. And in Ukrainian, that sector is spelled with a K.
Yes.
Were
Okay.
stopped at a checkpoint near Energodar. Ukraine's, and I'm not even going to try to pronounce this, newspaper reported the men were wearing masks, had guns, and said they were headed to protect the nuclear power plant in the city from possible seizures as they went to seize it.
That's what they do.
According to the paper, we moved out to protect the city, but we were stopped and circled by the police, a Right Sector member told the newspaper.
Yeah.
Local police said they had confiscated the men's weapons and launched a criminal investigation.
Well, that's...
Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant is the largest nuclear power plant, not only in Ukraine, but also in Europe.
Yeah.
The plant generates 40 to 42 billion kilowatt hours a year, which accounts for 1/5 of the average annual electricity production in Ukraine. One plant.
Yeah.
And
Well, that's...
47% of the electricity generated at all Ukrainian nuclear power plants. So 1/5 of all the electricity and almost half of the nuclear.
Yeah.
And people forget Chernobyl was in Ukraine.
That's true. That's true. The next item comes from the Valley News. Vermont Technical College will launch a bachelor's degree program in renewable energy this fall.
Excellent idea.
David Blittersdorf, renewable energy entrepreneur and president and CEO of Williston-based All Earth Renewables, has committed $120,000 to support the program. Nice of David.
He just did something else that was
Yeah,
beneficial.
that's right. He did that thing that involved giving his employees bonuses
Well, yeah.
connected with the amount of renewable.
At first, he started penalizing his employees for wasting energy,
Yeah.
and it deducted it from their paycheck. And this wasn't popular.
Yes.
So he turned around and said, "Okay, I'm going to give you $6,000 a year toward your fee, your
And I'll
penalty.
deduct the penalties from that.
And I'll deduct the penalties from that. And if
That
you
sounds
don't
reasonable.
use all of the $6,000, you keep the difference. And if you go beyond the $6,000, I'm not going to take any more out."
Yeah.
And this is right,
Yeah.
He's,
Well,
I like to meet
think
the guy. I've heard some good things
I have
about
met
him.
him. Yeah, I have met him. He's an interesting guy. He knew who I was when I met him, so he's paying attention to some little guys, I guess. On the 19th, and this from the Energy Collective, a NOAA-led study, this is really kind of distressing. A NOAA-led study finds a location where tropical cyclones reach maximum intensity has been shifting toward the poles at roughly 35 miles per decade. Scientists,
That's scary.
Yeah, it is. Scientists attribute the shift to human-caused greenhouse gases, stratospheric ozone depletion, and increases in pollution. 35 miles per decade. What that means is that when the tornadoes hit New England and when they hit Long Island and when they hit New Jersey, when we've got Sandy and when we've got Irene, it's going to be more powerful.
Mm-hmm.
That's what it means.
It also means they're going to be like hitting places like Nova Scotia where they never hit before.
Yeah, well, there was one a few years ago that hit Brazil, and there's never been one.
That was first time ever.
First one ever. So anyway, okay. Next from Business Green, China intends to accelerate deployment of solar power after setting a new record to more than triple installed capacity to 70 gigawatts by 2017. That's only a couple of years away. As part of its
only
drive,
a drop in the bucket for China.
well, it's true. As part of its drive to cut its reliance on coal, the new solar target is double the previous one set for 2015. Now, I don't have it in this week's materials, but they are in very much, although they're still increasing the amount of coal that's used, the percentage of increase has been dropped dramatically. So
the percentage of their total usage due to coal is lower.
Yes, and so they are getting serious about stopping
in the
the
right
use.
direction.
Yeah.
Well, we don't realize how huge their economy is.
Well, it's huge.
Yeah.
There's no question about it. In some ways certainly in some ways it's rivaling the economy or beating the economy of the United States. And one of those ways is growth in solar and wind and things like that. Okay. Now this one is a nice one to think about. This came from Clean Technica. Global Investment Bank UBS says solar is likely to account for 10% of global electricity capacity by 2020.
10% of all the power generated in the world.
Well, I don't know exactly what that means. 10% of a capacity. It might mean more like 5% of the electricity generated. Yeah, because they're talking about capacity.
Yeah.
And there should be a term which is neither capacity nor production, but it reflects the amount of capacity in terms of the production that it will.
We have not agreed on that term yet.
Yeah, but they say capacity, so I'm thinking it's not going to be 10% of production. It's going to be smaller than that. But as production costs fall and demand soars for the world's major economies and other markets, and that I think, honestly, I don't think they're right. I don't think it's going to be 10% of capacity. I think it's going to be more than that. From Business Green, we got this one. This is kind of cool. Dutch trains will start running on wind energy.
Yeah.
Isn't that cool?
Yeah.
We knew they could do it with ships.
I mean, well, no, they're not going to have sails on top of the train.
That's right. They're going to have wind generators all over Holland. And by the way, this is happening. It says here, wind farms in Holland, along with some in Belgium and Scandinavia, will supply 1.4 terawatts for the trains. They have a goal for 2015, and then they have another goal for 2020. And the stuff that is beyond the 2015 goal all has to be new power. They cannot use power from wind farms that already exist.
So what you're saying is the trains are there.
Yeah.
They're electric.
Yep.
And they've been buying their electric from the grid.
Yes.
And the train management has said, you guys are going to start putting up wind farms, solar farms, whatever farms.
That's right.
And that power is going to be dedicated to running the trains.
Yes.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
Why don't we do that here between Boston and Washington? They're all electric.
Why don't we do one between Brattleboro and Boston that's all electric? We could, the tracks exist. We could actually run trains on them. Oh well.
They used to do it.
Yeah, they used to. They were a little ahead of where we are today in some ways.
Yeah. I'm not going to get into that.
On the 20th, we have this. India, poor India, will have to invest $843 billion. And I said that right, $843 billion US dollars in the 2 decades ending 2030 to reduce its emission intensity and to gross domestic product. This is a formula. By 24% over 2017 levels, according to a planning commission's expert group. This is in the Economic Times.
This is not the same article, but it's about the same thing. It's India.
Okay.
We mentioned this.
Yeah.
He's promised solar power. Where did I?
This is the new Prime Minister of India that you're talking about.
Yeah. And they call him right wing.
This, and we have something coming up about him on the 21st.
This is probably
Narendra Modi. His name is.
That's what I've got up here now. I'll save it for later.
Yeah, save it. It'll be the fourth one down. Okay, Penn Energy gave us this. U.S. has announced some charges against 5 Chinese military hackers for cyber espionage targeting the U.S. private sector for commercial gain. The group allegedly conspired to target information in industries ranging from nuclear power to renewable energy and steel.
Yeah, I read that article in the paper. Those nasty Chinese, we wouldn't do anything like that, would we?
Never. We would never do that. What we would do is figure out where those guys are, and send
steal
them
their ideas.
And send them little airplanes. Oh dear. Okay. Yeah, the world is full of nasty people, and they're not all necessarily on the same side. Okay. From Green Energy Times. Green Energy Times. I work for them.
I said why that was so familiar to me.
Okay. From Green Energy Times, and actually this is just a reposting of something that came from somewhere else. It was actually a press release from Green Mountain Power. Green Mountain Power has announced a new home initiative called eHome, a first in the nation holistic home energy services program. The first home in the program is in Rutland.
I was reading about that in the paper, yeah.
And you know what? I'm writing an article on that for Green Energy Times.
Good, excellent.
So I interviewed the people there. They're really happy about this. There are things going on in that are just kind of mind-boggling.
I think I saw it on
yeah,
TV.
they've got a heat pump for their heat and their hot water. They have solar panels. Green Mountain Power is helping these people reduce the amount of power that they use.
Correct.
We're back to that collaborative commons idea, where you're getting something for free. Well, they are doing this for a total of 100 homes in Rutland.
I was going to say it's about 100 homes. Yep.
Yeah, and the woman who lived in the house said, well, they spent 3 weeks, basically doing the house over. There were certain things they didn't do. They didn't replace the refrigerator. They didn't replace the stove. Why? Because the family had recently bought both of those, and they were new and in good condition. But they did replace the washing machine and the dryer, and they did a whole bunch. My recollection is that they did not provide new windows because the windows were already new, but they did completely insulate the house. This is Green Mountain Power is doing this. Interesting operation.
They're an interesting company.
They are.
They're pretty progressive.
Yeah. Okay, on the 21st of May, we have this. Once again, the world hit record heat levels. The average global temperature last month tied with the hottest April on record 4 years ago. It was 1.39 degrees Fahrenheit, which is 0.77 degrees global temperature. 0.77 degrees Celsius warmer than the average last century. And that from the Huffington Post. And these people have been saying, well, we've hit a plateau. Obviously, this isn't a plateau. We're at...
Yeah, I hear you.
It's sad. We're just going to have to get that under control. And now we're back to India again. Narendra Modi. I'm probably mispronouncing that, but I'm trying, doing the best I can.
Well, you can't do bad on the Modi part.
Yes, you can. It could be Modi. India's new Prime Minister has promised to bring solar power to more than 400 million Indians currently living without electricity. Modi's, I'm not even going to try to pronounce the name of the party, which swept into power on May 16th, has prioritized solar power for its energy strategy. It's going to be interesting to see where these people go, because the previous government was big on nuclear. And they were building nuclear power stations in places where the local people really didn't want them. There were big protests.
The previous government was a dynasty. It was the Nehru-Gandhi dynasty.
I didn't know that.
They've held power for maybe 50 years.
Yeah, I was unaware of that. But this, it's going to be interesting to see, because what he's doing is he's addressing the fact that these people don't have electricity. And he's saying to them, we're going to put up solar panels, and we're going to try to get, and solar, because it costs so much to put in transmission lines, that it doesn't make any sense to have centralized power for these 400 million people. But he says, we're going to put in solar panels in the villages, possibly on people's roofs, and we're going to try to have a goal to get everybody 2 light bulbs, 1 television set,
And a solar cooker.
and a solar cooker. Now, the solar cooker is not electric.
Not electric, right?
Yeah.
Right.
And I know people who use solar cookers and use them often. There's
I
something we
don't
can
have
do
it here, but in this same article they mentioned that the amount of sunny days they have in northern India is over 300.
Yes. Which means that why would you go out and burn charcoal, which you have to buy, which somebody has to make, and it's very messy, when you can cook something by solar?
Well, they don't use charcoal.
What do they use?
Dung.
They use dung. I would imagine that's very messy.
It smells good. Even when it's burnt.
Yeah.
I have experienced it.
Okay. Have you been in northern India?
Not northern India, but the experience I can remember is I visited the Taj Mahal,
Ah, okay.
which is half a mile from a rather large town,
Yeah,
small city.
yeah.
And
People burn dung.
well, I think that's what it was. It was a horrible smell, especially in the evening
Oh,
when
wow.
everybody was cooking. And the town itself, they had to go through the town like this.
Well, the thing is, the World Health Organization has said that 7 million people die every year because of air pollution.
Mm-hmm.
And the business of burning dung, burning wood, burning charcoal, burning it indoors without a chimney,
Mm-hmm.
the ventilation. Charcoal indoors without a chimney is almost a prescription for carbon monoxide.
Carbon
poisoning.
monoxide, yep.
And in the old days, in ancient Rome, they used to talk about carbon. They used to talk about people being smothered, and very often we think that's what that was. They had a fire going for some heat, and the tent door was closed
You
or
can't
something.
smell carbon monoxide.
Can't smell
and
carbon
all of
monoxide.
a sudden, you're out.
You're better off with dung.
Yeah, yeah, you are. Well,
Anyway.
at least in the short term, carbon monoxide is more dangerous.
Carbon monoxide is not pleasant. No warning at all. Okay. That thing about Narendra Modi came from Blue and Green Tomorrow. Now, from solarserver.com, we have this. Mexico, this is impressive. Mexico announced a goal to increase its share of renewable energy to 32.9% of installed electric generation capacity by 2018 at a 5th Clean Energy Ministerial in Seoul. Now, I would have thought that they would have announced that in Mexico, but I guess no. Seoul's the good as they needed to announce it to other
They
people.
said they announced it in Mexico in Spanish.
Ah, that's what it was. Yes.
It's interesting because we've been talking, almost 6 months now. I think this is the first time Mexico's even come up.
It's possible. Yeah.
We're talking about India, we're talking about China.
I know we've had stuff about
Europe,
Chile.
Germany, Chile.
Chile.
I
Yeah.
know. And they're making some pretty good progress down there.
Yeah, my recollection is that there was one thing that we did early on about Mexico putting in solar. Mexico has been slow to adopt this stuff, but they're getting it.
They're getting it. Yeah.
They really are. The next one comes from Deutsche Welle, and why Deutsche Welle would be the one that I chose to publish this, I don't know, but it was. Maybe it was the first one I came to. A regional Japanese court has ruled that 2 reactors of the Ohi nuclear plant could not be restarted, at least for the time being. It's the first.
No, they've all been shut off now since Fukushima.
They're all off since Fukushima.
So these 2 are about to come back on.
The government is trying to get a dozen of them on, and the court has said, no, you can't start these 2. It's the first time any lawsuit in Japan brought by an anti-nuclear group has been successful in the 45 years of Japanese nuclear power history.
So this is precedent setting.
This is precedent setting. Now, I should point out that there were 2 reactors at Ohi that there's a lot of controversy about, because the law in Japan says that you cannot have a reactor sitting directly on top of an earthquake fault that is active. And active means that it has moved in the last period of some years. And
50 years or
no,
whatever.
it's actually more like 200,000 years. But
Oh. Okay.
the reactors at Ohi are sitting directly on top of the fault. I mean, the fault goes right under the reactor. And so they dug trenches around the building to find out whether the fault had actually moved. And the geologists were in disagreement about whether it had happened. And my reaction was that the ones who said it had not happened basically browbeat the others into admitting that maybe it hadn't happened, and then they said this is okay. I might be wrong about that, but it might have nothing to do with that. But the important thing is we've got a precedent going on. And by the way, the power company is appealing this case. But Japan is changing. Mm-hmm. It really is, and we'll have to see where that all goes. It's going to take time.
Well,
Now,
Fukushima woke a lot of people up.
yeah, all over the world.
And it's not over yet.
No, it's
by any
not.
means. I got a picture of Fukushima later. We'll show.
Okay. Now from the El Paso Times, we got this same day, which was the 21st, yesterday. New Mexico environment officials say that more than 500 barrels of waste from Los Alamos
Yeah.
National
I read this
Laboratory
one,
were
too.
packed with kitty litter.
Organic kitty litter.
Yeah, suspected of causing chemical reaction and a radiation release at the government's underground nuclear waste dump. Now,
I don't
Los
see how
Alamos.
anybody could have predicted that would have happened.
Well, you know, I'm kind of 2 minds about this. My guess is that somebody said, "Oh, well, we don't have a standard kitty litter that we're using. Why would they go from something to organic?"
Beats me.
My guess is because the organic was less expensive.
That's a good guess.
And what we've got is a buyer who probably said, this stuff isn't regulated. Now, what was happening, it doesn't make any sense that they were packing nuclear waste in kitty litter, except that the nuclear waste could leak. It was liquid.
Yes.
And
like
so
pumping litter that grabs the liquid.
Yeah, they wanted something that would
Yeah.
grab the liquid.
But
And
it seems to make sense.
it seems to. My suspicion is that this was a bad choice to go to an organic product.
Well, it turned out your suspicion is right.
And I think that, but you know, and it's, what a mess. Oh well. Fortunately, we don't have that problem in, actually we do have nuclear waste in Vermont, don't we? Okay, today's news, and there's only one thing here. Good Energy, which is a UK company that produces renewable power, released data showing that the UK now imports over 60% of the fuel it used to generate electricity in 2012, up 12% from 2011. Now, I don't know if that means that the 2011 percentage was increased 12%, or whether the 2011 percentage was 48% and it went to 60%. I wish people would express these things a little bit more clearly.
Is it
But
a
nevertheless,
percentage of the previous number, or is it a percentage added to the previous?
Yeah. It is, and now it says, however, solar, wind, and other renewable technologies provided more than a quarter of all UK-based electric power in 2012. Now, this is an interesting situation because so much of the renewable power in the UK is produced in Scotland, and Scotland is about to vote on being independent.
Yes.
And if they are independent, then the UK is going to have to do some scrambling to get some renewable power, although they could buy it from Scotland.
Well, even the oil is
Yeah.
in the North Sea, and I don't know who will own it if Scotland goes independent.
Yeah,
And I don't know that the British know who will own it.
they've got some questions to answer, but The point is, the British government has been, I don't know what the term is. It's like they've been leaderless on renewable power. They keep changing their minds. They keep deciding to do something else.
Well, it seems it's still the present. Is this David Cameron? Is his name?
Yeah.
I think it's him and his gang. They're Thatcherites.
Well, they seem to be leaderless. They have instituted a bunch of reforms. They want to put all the wind farms at sea.
Yeah.
They want to have all the new
Why? Because the people
solar
aren't
power.
objecting.
Well, again, I just
They've
wrote
had votes. The people prefer.
Yeah.
Well, they were given a Hobson's choice, I guess. It was wind power or fracking.
Yes. And
So maybe that wasn't an honest question, but still,
Yeah.
it was still overwhelmingly in favor of wind.
in favor of wind. And most people favor wind if they don't have the prospect of wind farms going up in the area where they live.
I haven't read. Yeah, well, that's true. NIMBY.
Yeah.
I haven't read anything about any movement anti-wind in Britain at all.
There are big movements in there are local movements. There are a lot of local organizations
That are anti-wind.
That are anti-wind. A lot of them. But it's interesting because I'm writing another article about wind for Green Energy Times, and this is in Germany, and it's about a town in the Black Forest called Freiamt, and Freiamt has it produces about 20% more power than it needs. Mm-hmm. And it gets its power from wind, from solar, from biomass, from hydro. It gets the power wherever it sees an opportunity to get power. But the thing that's interesting about Freiamt is the way they installed their wind turbines. Freiamt is a town of 4,500 people, but it's actually 5 villages, which are scattered around the countryside. Mm-hmm. So if you put in a wind farm, it's going to be close to a bunch of people. To everybody, really. And so the leadership in the town said, okay, we want to have a wind farm. We've got a good opportunity. What we're going to do, though, is we're going to put in a site where we would like to have 10 wind turbines, we're going to put 2. That way everybody gets used to what's going on. They'll understand what they're voting on when they vote about extending it. And the people were willing to have 2 turbines put in. When they had the 2 turbines put in, and they were getting biomass digesters, which were supplying them with gas. They were getting.
They're doing a little bit of everything.
They're doing everything. When the 2 wind turbines went in, everybody could live with them for a period of time. They decided that they were going to think about more, and so they did. And basically, an overwhelming majority of the people in the town said, "Yes, we want more." And now they've got 5. Which they did in stages. They went from 2 to 3, and then at 3 they said, do you want more? And the people said yes, and they went to 4. And now they've got, as I said, something like 20%. I think it was 17% perhaps, but it was close to 20% of more power than they need. And what they're generating in excess is being sold to the grid. So, here's a town which has got income from this. And one of the things, there's a farm, people named Schneider owned a farm, and several years ago they ran into trouble because some part of Europe had mad cow disease, and they had to figure out what they were going to do about mad cow disease because they could not sell things. They had cattle and they couldn't sell because and I think it may even have affected milk consumption. So they looked at this and they thought, what are we going to do? And they put in, for the farm, they put in a couple of wind turbines, and they put in a huge solar array that was going on the roofs of barns and stuff like that. I mean, it was 300 kilowatts or something, but it was a big array. And then they put in other things, and now they've got an income from these various renewable energy sources, and a lot of farmers in Germany and other parts of the world actually are doing exactly that. They're saying it's a product. It's just like growing pigs or cattle or corn, and it's going to be one of the things that we sell.
That's a good way of looking at it. It's a product that farms can produce.
Yeah.
And it's appropriate for farms.
It is in many cases, yes.
It's interesting that they're doing a little bit of everything here.
Yeah,
And by golly, we're right here in Brattleboro,
yeah.
situated to do that exact same
Well,
thing.
I think that's true.
Something like it's going to happen.
Well, I think it is. I think, you know, we've probably got, certainly we could put in a lot of solar. And
Right out at the dump.
yeah, that's right. And I don't know that there's a single place in Brattleboro that would really be well situated for wind. But
I don't think so.
I don't think so. But there are towns around that have sites that
Yeah,
could be
yeah.
developed. And if the people in those towns want to do that, I think my guess is that if they decided they wanted to do what Freyant did and put in one or two wind turbines and find out what it's like to have one or two wind turbines around, they could do that. You know, there was another one too. There was a thing that happened last summer in Holland, where a group of people in a, wish I could remember the name of the town. I think it's Culemborg. They wanted to have a wind turbine, and Holland is a good place for wind turbines because it's very flat. And they
You
decided,
get those sea breezes.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah.
They've been doing windmills for 2,000 years.
absolutely, they decided to go to the town and you know see, will the people in the town have a wind turbine, and they eventually got the idea that they were going to do this with a co-op, where people could buy into the wind turbine for a price, and I think the price was 200 euros, something for a share.
Doesn't sound like much.
It's not a lot of money. No, it was 2,000 euros.
Okay.
So it was not enough to keep the thing to only rich people. And they went to the people and said, "We're going to crowdfund this."
Okay.
And they crowdfunded a wind turbine, and that wind turbine was completely funded from the people in that town in 13 hours. Okay, it was almost $1.5 million they had to raise. They raised it in 13 hours. But the interesting thing about this is, they did not buy a new wind turbine. They bought a used wind turbine.
Okay. All right.
I didn't know there was a market for used wind turbines, but they did, and they saved themselves. I don't know. I'm guessing probably 30% of the cost for the wind turbine by going to a used one. And they went to an organization that specializes in finding old wind turbines, not old, but used wind turbines that are not wanted.
Well, why shouldn't there be such a guy? There's what these people that you've just been talking about are doing is a very appropriate way to enter renewables.
Oh yeah,
We'll try it. We'll see what it feels like.
yeah,
We'll expand it.
Yeah.
Instead of some guy coming in and saying, "I'm going to put up 500 wind turbines."
yeah. How would people in Brattleboro like it if somebody said, "Okay, we're going to put 6 wind turbines on Wintasticate"?
I think there'd be a lot of problems.
There'd be a lot of problems. I would love to see 6 wind turbines on Wintasticate.
I wouldn't object either. I
But-
mean, the view on the top has been destroyed by the tower anyhow.
Yeah, but
It's not that you got a pristine mountain.
and you know, I came across another article that was recently about a woman who was living in Scotland, and
She's here.
she's
got her
there.
here. I
You
got
got
her
her.
here.
Let's show her.
I got her
This is
here.
kind of cool.
I got her here. I thought this was great. I even got a picture of her. Here we go.
There you go. There she
we
is.
go. Let me get her up here.
There you go. Now here's a woman, and you know, it would be very difficult probably for people watching television to be able to see the wind turbines in the background.
They're there.
But they're there.
They're
And now what she's got covering her horizon is a very large wind farm, which is not very far away. And I'm going to guess that it might be a mile away, but it's big. And what happened was a few years ago, she and her husband were looking for a place to live, and they wanted to buy a house. And she was taken to this house, and she said she thought it was okay until she opened the back door. And the moment she saw those wind turbines, she was sold. And she said her favorite thing to do now
Is to watch the wind
is to sit in the backyard, drinking tea and just watching these wind turbines.
He
And
finds the gracefully turning turbines soothing.
yeah, yeah. And you know what this brings to mind is that the Australian Medical Association has done pretty extensive work on trying to figure out wind turbine syndrome. Now, in case anybody who's watching doesn't know what that is, it is a medical condition that is supposedly the result of living too close to wind turbines. Mm-hmm. And it is said that it might be from infrasound, which is sound
that we can't hear.
That we can't hear because it's too low. Some animals can hear it, elephants can hear it, but they say that the sound but flickering light involving the wind turbine blades going around, things of that nature, are blamed on, wind turbine syndrome is blamed on those. The Australian Medical Association and various organizations in Australia have actually studied this fairly carefully. Mm-hmm. And what they found was, yeah, there is infrasound near wind turbines. There's also infrasound near the beach. There's also infrasound near forests.
The human body creates infrasound.
That's exactly right. A lot of infrasound. And the infrasound near wind turbines is not greater than it is in most other places that are not near wind turbines. Okay. And they also did some statistical studies in which they went to wind farms and they studied the population around to find out what symptoms they had. Now, wind turbine syndrome, the symptoms that are blamed on this are just about as extensive as you could possibly imagine. Migraine headaches, difficulty sleeping.
They're common symptoms.
They're common symptoms with lots of causes. And what they found was most wind farms had no increase in symptomology among the people who live around them. Mm-hmm. Some do. Mm-hmm. And there's an interesting distinctive feature that separates the ones that do and the ones that don't. Mm-hmm. And the distinctive feature is the ones that have wind turbine syndrome are the ones that have been targeted by anti-wind activists. Mm-hmm. So their official position paper is that wind turbine syndrome is real. Mm-hmm. It is a communicated disease, mm-hmm. like that thing that you were talking about, and that it is the result of stress mm-hmm. that is produced by anti-wind activists. Now, this in a country that has a government which is profoundly anti-renewable and is the home of the Wabra Foundation, which is probably the most important anti-wind mm-hmm. group in the world. And interestingly enough, the Wabra Foundation has been sued by the town of Wabra. They named themselves the Wabra.
They don't want them to use the word.
They don't want them to use the name. They said, they went into Wabra to save all the people from wind turbine syndrome, and now years later, the people in Wabra not only don't want to be saved anymore, they don't want Wabra Foundation to have their name. So the result of this is, I think kind of like global warming, there's some room for doubt until there's no longer room for doubt. And
I think you put your finger on the button there. It's stress.
Well, I didn't do it. They did.
No, but it's stress.
Yeah.
That they are feeling sick.
Yeah.
They're feeling sick because of stress.
Right.
And in their case, the stress is not caused by the turbines, but it's caused by their reaction to the turbines.
Yes.
And it could be something else equally stressful would give them the same symptoms.
That's right. And I think it is conceivable that some people get wind turbine syndrome from the stress of being near wind turbines simply because they're near wind turbines. And if that's correct, then perhaps those people should be, perhaps we should deal with this a different way than we actually do now. But the idea that people are suffering because of anti-wind activists is something which I find a little bit, I find it a little distressing. And
yeah, but it happens. It's human nature.
It's human nature.
I have said, and I'll say it again, as soon as somebody says let's before they finish the sentence, somebody else has started an ad hoc group to oppose it.
Yes, that's right. That is right. Okay, we are
We're coming close to the
coming
end.
close to the end of our show. So I want to thank people who have watched for joining us this week for Energy Week with George Harvey and Tom Finnell. I am George Harvey. This is Tom Finnell.
You, George, me, Tom.
I think so. I've had sciatica this last week.
Yeah, I've heard
I gotta
you
tell
me
you.
that.
I gotta tell you. Don't get it.
It's not created by wind turbines.
There aren't any wind turbines around. But you know, if anybody who's thinking about having sciatica, I would recommend against it.
I'll take your advice.
Well, I've been telling people that I can't walk without being in pain. 50 feet and I'm in pain. I
Yeah.
can't stand without being in pain. 2 minutes, I'm in pain. I can't lie down without being in pain.
What do you do?
Well, I can sit, and right now I'm tolerably comfortable. And it happens that sitting extends to riding a bicycle. So I can ride a bicycle. So that's how I get around. So I tell people, I work sitting down, and the only really big inconvenience of this is the fact that now I know I've got to learn how to ride a bicycle while I'm sleeping, or sleep while I'm sleep while I'm riding a bike.
Okay. I knew a guy could sleep while he was driving. He's not around anymore.
I see. You would recommend against sleeping while I'm riding my bike? Yeah. Well,
Well, you can sleep on a stationary bike. I bet you that's been done.
I could sleep sitting in a chair, although I don't do it well. I have been trying to sleep lying down, and it's not gone as well as it might. But we'll see. Maybe I'll get over it soon. Maybe I won't. But we'll see how it goes.
Well, we said goodbye to our people, but
Yes, as a matter of fact, we can continue talking about things for those people
there's
who
a couple of things I've
are
been
just
saving.
going to be dealing with our stuff in a webcast. Go
And
ahead.
it was interesting because it was one of the very first articles
Yes.
in last week's first blog. It was one of the last articles in yesterday's blog.
Yeah.
And they're two separate articles, and they're very closely related, and they both relate to Vermont.
Ah.
And I'll get the second one here, which was the first one. Shumlin speaks out on utility lines. I'll get it up there on the screen.
Okay.
And some of the background here is that over in New Hampshire, there's been a project to bring hydropower from Quebec down into Boston and Connecticut.
Right.
Through some pretty pristine country.
Yep.
It's called the Northern Pass, I believe.
Yes.
And it's going to be overhead transmission lines, traditional power lines that you see around. And there's a lot of people
are
over
ugly
there
as sin, and people hate them.
are up in arms. Some
Yeah.
of them are getting wind turbine syndrome over it. But
I laugh, but it's sad. Go ahead.
I'm just making a bad joke, I guess. But the point is that there is a lot of opposition over there.
Yeah.
And people, investors, governments, whatever, are looking at alternatives. And there's no flies on Shumlin. He's aware of this, and he's come up with a proposal to run it down, run the cables underground under I-91.
Brilliant idea.
I think it is.
Yeah.
And it turns out he's not alone. There's other people thinking about this. But I'll cover what I got here. Asked if he would insist that such lines be buried through Vermont to have his blessing. Shumlin said in most cases, the proposals already factor in the cost of burying lines into their price. Now I'm quoting Shumlin. Listen, this is what I know. If we're going to address climate change in any significant way, which we must, it makes sense for us to find ways to bring green, clean, renewable hydropower from Canada to New England.
We could do an entire show on this.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we might.
Well, just think about this for a second. One of the biggest problems with transmission lines is that
They're
you've got to
ugly.
deal with right-of-ways.
Well, they're ugly, right-of-ways, and they are very vulnerable.
Well,
I mean, just ordinary hunters shoot to the insulators just for fun.
Yeah. Don't say that. Not on
Somebody might
television.
get an idea.
Somebody will get an idea. But this particular idea is to have these things buried under I-91. Well, under doesn't necessarily mean under the road surface. It can mean under the
shoulder.
the shoulder.
Or alongside the right of way.
Yeah.
That hasn't been
or in the
determined.
median strip.
Yes. As for burying lines under Interstate 91, it was I would love for the federal highway infrastructure to be a corridor for transmission. He's
Why
not
not?
just talking about for
Why
one.
not?
Why not? Go from the right places to the right places.
That's right.
And once they're there, they're accessible. And they're relatively trouble-free. And these cables, they've been developing these cables now, high-voltage cables, for 50 years or more.
Yeah.
They're pretty reliable now.
So you could take this thing down you could take it down I-91, you could take it down I-89.
Mm-hmm.
You could take it basically between those two. You could take it right into
Somebody's
Boston.
talking about taking it along I-95 from Washington to Boston.
Yeah, I mean,
There's a lot
why
of people
not?
thinking about this.
And then you can cover these things with those photovoltaic panels that we were talking about last week.
Here's the other one. It's related. This is newer. Well, it's newer to me, but it's the same idea, but a different development. Development of a power line under Lake Champlain.
Yes,
And this is a submerged cable.
yes.
So it's like the other cables, except it's got steel armor on the outside to protect it from tankers,
barnacles.
barnacles, whatever.
Freshwater mussels.
PDI New England is the name of the company. I'm not going to get into who they are because I don't know who they are. They plan to build a 154-mile, $1.2 billion underground transmission line to import up to 1,000 megawatts of renewable Canadian power into the grid. That's a gigawatt. That's a lot.
That's a lot. That's more than Vermont Yankee was producing by a factor of about.
Yeah.
It's about 1.5 times what Vermont Yankee was doing.
The project called Clean Power Link would pass underneath Lake Champlain to the end of where Lake Champlain ceases being a lake.
Yeah.
It's all in Vermont. It's all on the Vermont side of the lake. The very lower part of it, where the lake is in fact the border, it's right in the middle. And when the lake ceases being a lake, it's going to go directly overland to Ludlow.
Okay.
And it's going to use state highways.
Yes.
And I read about the state highways, and it was said, we're going to leave the highway in better shape than it is now.
Well, as I think about this, is there a reason why you couldn't lay a cable down the Connecticut River?
No. There really isn't. I mean, there's probably a lot of reasons, but I mean, there's no technical reason. As we speak, I'm sure somebody's thinking about it.
Well, I am.
Okay. Well, there
I'm not
you go.
I'm not saying I'm in favor of it. I'm just wondering whether it's
There's
possible.
another guy planning on running a shorter cable from New York State across Champlain into Burlington. Yeah, let's see if I got something. It's also planning to set up a so-called benefits fund that could be used to help support Lake Champlain cleanup. A little bit more on that at the bottom of this. This is not the only proposed transmission line to pass through Vermont in order to serve southern renewable energy markets. So it's not really here to serve Vermont. It's here to go through Vermont. Okay, so there's a problem there.
Well, that's not necessarily a problem. The fact that it's not here to
It's
serve.
a problem, but it's a solvable problem.
Yeah,
We
the
have
fact
a
that it's
solution.
not here to serve Vermont doesn't mean that it can't serve Vermont.
Exactly.
And it doesn't mean that Vermont can't put all the excess power that it gets from having 300% of the generation capacity that it needs on the grid to sell it to people in Boston.
Well, here's part of the solution. A quote from Richard Sodek.
Okay.
You know who he was?
No, I don't.
Well, he was a former utility regulator in Vermont.
Okay.
I'm not sure the Public Service Board or the Public Service Department or what, but whether this is underground, over water, overhead, whatever, there is no advantage to simply being a corridor unless you get something out of it. Well, okay.
Yes.
And then a separate quote, totally separate quote, officials in the Chumlin administration said that's exactly what they're looking for, how to maximize the value for Vermont from any transmission project that runs through the state.
Yes.
Now, of course, it would be taxed. It's property.
Yes.
That's going to help the towns that it goes through.
Yes.
But beyond that, I would say that it would be some way of writing in exchange for permission to go through Vermont, you got to pay Vermont a toll or something of that nature.
Yeah.
I mean, there are ways. These guys haven't even begun thinking of the ways to do it.
I think this is some very creative thinking that's going on.
I think it is. I think it is. And I think it's the wave of the future because, as I've already said, the overhead transmission lines are number one, ugly, but number two, very, very vulnerable.
Yes.
They're vulnerable to weather, they're vulnerable to accidents, and they're very vulnerable if people want to create havoc. And they don't have to do, as we've already spoken on this program, a heck of a lot to create that havoc.
Right, that's true.
So that's what I got there, and we were talking about Scotland, so this is on the very bottom here. This is in the Shetland Islands, which is way the heck off the coast of Scotland. It's up between Scotland and Norway.
Yes.
It's as close to Bergen, Norway as it is to Scotland.
This is where the Shetland ponies come from.
Yeah, yeah.
There's Shetland cows up there too. It's
What
not good
they're
grazing.
doing here is the world's first community-owned tidal turbine.
Yes.
It's
Yep.
in North Yell, in the Shetland Islands. And there's a picture of it. It's locally owned. It's owned by the community, or a subdivision of the community. And it's going to be powering up to 30 homes, which is probably all the homes on the island. A locally owned ice plant and an industrial park.
Ice plant.
They make
Ice plant. Why would
Probably for the fish.
for fishing, of course. Yeah.
Probably for the fish.
Yes.
Yeah, because it looks like a fishing village.
Yeah.
It's got to be a fishing village.
I would imagine.
I'm not sure it's a big bread base.
Well, as I said, there is such a thing as Shetland cows, but I doubt anybody's making a lot of money on them.
It sits, this Nova 30 tidal turbine sits on the seabed at a depth of more than 100 feet. Engine is transmitted offshore through a 1 kilometer subsea cable.
Yes.
The same kind of thing that's going under Champlain. For the first time anywhere in the world, a community-owned tidal turbine is generating electricity. It will have a positive impact on the North Yell community and the economy.
Interesting.
Interesting.
Yeah.
There's a lot of interesting stuff going on in Scotland.
Well, the Scottish are you know, they have this, they have a movement to become independent of the UK.
Yeah, I'm well aware of that.
And the energy developments in Scotland are to a great extent tied to that desire to be independent.
Mm-hmm.
So the Scots who are interested in being independent are almost all in favor of whatever they can get in renewable power, and the rest of the people in Scotland, a lot of them are just people who see the advantages of having. I mean, we were talking earlier about the price of power going to zero,
Mm-hmm.
and that could be a very real goal. I mean, this is not a dream; it's a goal.
Mm-hmm.
And in a place like Scotland, they don't have a lot of sunshine. It would be hard to I mean, they're putting in PV arrays in Scotland now,
Yeah.
even as we speak, big ones. But I mean, big by Scottish standards. But what they're finding is these turbines, the wind turbines, the ocean turbines, the various things that they can do to produce power. And they're producing power that has no fuel. And that business of producing power that has no fuel all of a sudden means that the people in that country can have their own independence in terms of energy. Mm-hmm. And if they've got political independence and energy independence, then they are in a position where they can really start dealing with the rest of the world on an equal footing. Mm-hmm. And they don't want to get buried by England. And you know, there's
they have been for, what, 1,000 years?
Well, yeah. I mean, you could argue that King James I was a Scottish king who became the King of England, but you know, that becomes kind of moot when his son comes to the throne who was raised in England. You know, it's just, it's one of those things.
What was that Mel Gibson film?
Braveheart.
Braveheart.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They had I mean, the business of the English and the Scottish fighting with each other actually didn't end when the Scottish kings, you know, the Stuart kings took over England. Mm-hmm. because Mary Stuart was the cousin of Queen Elizabeth I, and Elizabeth had no children. When she died, it went to Mary's son, James, who was already James VI of Scotland. But they'd been fighting forever, and they continued to fight right up through the 18th century. And now there are Scottish people who just they want to be able to stand up, you know, say I'm Scottish and have it mean I'm independent.
Well, they have been moving in that direction. I mean, 10 years ago they didn't have their own parliament.
Right, and it wasn't that much. It wasn't that long ago that you could barely find people who spoke the Scottish Gaelic language. Which, by the way, there's Scottish Gaelic and there's Scots.
Yes, and they're two different languages.
They're two entirely different languages. And to a certain extent, a person who speaks English can understand a person who speaks Scots, because it's a very close.
It's a dialect of English. It's the language of Bobby Burns.
Yes.
We sneak it, cowering beastie.
Yeah, which I can't understand at all. But nevertheless, you know.
And there are people who natively speak Scots.
Yes. And there are people who natively speak Scottish Gaelic. But now, today,
it's growing.
That's growing, and they're starting to teach Scottish Gaelic in schools, very much the way that Welsh are teaching Welsh in schools, and which they were not permitted to do. All, you know, and it wasn't all that long ago that they were not permitted to do that. And
it was worse in Ireland. I mean, it was a capital offense to speak Gaelic.
Capital offense. Yeah. What do you do with people who are?
I met some guys in Dingle, which is kind of a seafaring fishing town.
Yeah.
And Dingle is a part of Ireland where a lot of people natively speak Irish Gaelic.
Yeah.
Which they don't call Gaelic, they call it Irish.
Okay.
And these guys took a longboat, a rowboat, a carp, and it was about half a dozen of them. And they went along the coast of Ireland, and the coast of the Isle of Man, and the coast of Scotland, and deliberately went to communities where they speak Gaelic.
Yeah.
Now, each has their own brand of Gaelic.
Yeah.
But they were able to understand each other.
Yeah.
And it really sounded like quite a nice adventure for these guys. You know, just did it in the summertime.
The Isle of Man is my grandmother's great grandfather, I think he was, came from the Isle of Man, and he spoke Manx until he was in his 20s when he joined
which is a Gaelic tongue.
Yeah,
very much like Irish Gaelic.
Yeah, and he joined the British Navy and learned English, and then he became a poet.
Oh yeah.
And he wrote poetry in English and in Manx. And I think that he was one of the most important of the Manx poets. But between the time he died and the time I was born, Manx went completely out of existence. And what has happened is the people in the Isle of Man, which is not part of England or Scotland or Ireland, it's sort of independent, decided that...
Crown colony, I think.
I forget the exact...
It's like...
It's not a colony, it's something else. But anyway, they decided that they wanted to resurrect the language.
Yeah, yeah.
So they had lots of examples of it. They had lots of written language. They had some records of how people spoke, and so they started teaching the language.
Revived it.
Well, they had never lost the language altogether. There was always somebody who knew how to speak it, but there were no native speakers in the sense that the children would grow up and then they'd learn from somebody else how to speak it. But they started speaking it, and they started teaching it and started pushing it, and then they started having young people come along who said, we're going to raise our children speaking that language. So that means that now there are Manx speakers who are native Manx speakers.
That's interesting. I didn't know that.
And I don't know how extensive that is, but they're doing that in Wales. They're doing it to a certain extent in Ireland and Scotland.
Well,
but in
Ireland,
Wales,
there was
it's
a
big.
period of time within our lifetime
where
the Irish schools taught only in Irish.
Okay.
And I remember a friend of mine when I was in Saudi Arabia, he was an Irish contractor.
Yeah.
And he was telling me how difficult it was for him to learn geometry in Gaelic.
Oh dear. But
They have stopped doing that now. Irish Gaelic is an option,
yeah,
but it's not mandatory,
yeah,
which I think is good. I mean,
yeah,
and a lot of people are interested in it. A lot of people are taking it as a second language, and there are parts of Ireland where it never went away.
yes,
It was and still is the language of the people.
yes,
They call it the Gaelic.
yeah. Okay.
And the only difference
They
that
call
I've
it
noticed,
Dagultic. It sounds Yiddish.
the Gaeltic, Gaeltacht.
Yeah, well, Dagultic in Yiddish would sound like somebody being guilty of something. But, you know, it's interesting that the Scots and the Irish, to a very large extent, and the Isle of Man, that whole area, and also Wales, Cornwall, all of that entire area, which is Celtic, is all of that area is interested in renewable power. There's big impetus in the whole thing, including Northern Ireland. You know, there's a lot of interest there,
definitely.
and I think a lot of that is because the wind power is there, the tidal power is there, the lack of resources that you find in areas like that is there. The west coast of Ireland, where they speak Gaelic, where they speak Irish, is remote.
Some of it is. Absolutely.
And there's a reason why people in the Hebrides speak the Scottish language, and the people in Shetland, I think they speak a language that's just closer to Norse than it is to anything else.
It's halfway between them, so
Yeah.
you could be right.
But there's a reason why all those countries, all those areas, are interested in. First of all, have those languages, but second of all, have that interest in wind power and hydropower, which is that they're poor. You know, there was an island off the coast of Scotland called Egg. And they have been proclaimed by I don't know how many articles in the news as the first island in the world that's 100% powered by renewables, which happens not to be true. You know, I mean, if you look back a year and a half ago, excuse me, Tokelau, which is in the South Pacific, got its 3 islands actually. They got their solar power, and they converted their diesel, which they had
Yeah.
so that it was no longer running from diesel fuel. It was running from reclaimed waste from some kind of palm tree. I forget what it was, but it was waste that they have.
So it's biomass.
It's biomass, but they have a system that is 100% solar with battery backup, unless there's some kind of problem, in which case they switch to a renewable biomass backup.
diesel.
So they're 100%
Yeah,
renewable power, and they were funded in that to some extent by the New Zealand government. But you know, on those islands, and in Egg, for example, Egg was in Scotland, and we think of Scotland as a first world country, you know, a country that's advanced and has money and things. And those people, for their power, were dependent on a diesel generator that did not run 24 hours a day.
Yep.
And at some point in the evening, everybody might as well go to bed because the power's going out. And they did not have power 24/7, and I don't know how reliable it was during the daytime. It may be that it wasn't reliable, but it was off more than it was on, as I understand it. And so when they got solar or wind, they got wind. When they got wind, and they got whatever they got for backup, and I've forgotten what Egg got. They weren't the first island in the world to be 100% renewable. They were, however, very happy to have power 100% of the time because of renewables. And you know, I mean, Samsø off the coast of Denmark, we've talked about. That's 100% renewable. They're grid tied, so they can get power from the grid, but they are 100% renewable. There's a lot of other places. It's not
going to be a lot more.
Yeah, there is, but the point is, all over the west coast of Ireland, where people speak Irish, all over the west and north coasts of Scotland, where people speak to the Scottish Gaelic, and those people are remote, and if they don't live on islands, which a lot of them do, they might as well live on islands because they're not on the grid, which makes them, in some ways, very similar to the people in India who are getting their power. All of this power is coming in because of renewables. It's not coming in because fossil fuels are cheap. It's coming in because renewables are cheap. And that's a message that really we kind of have to get across to people. The renewable power in Vermont, the cheapest source of power we can get is solar. People don't believe that. They don't understand it. They don't know that you can go to a solar installer, solarize Putney if you're in Putney, or solarize Windham County.
Well, now there's a lot of ways you could get involved with solar. You don't even have to have a place to put the solar panels.
That's right. But when you do that, it's cheaper than buying power from Green Mountain Power. And in fact, Green Mountain Power is perfectly happy to help you along with that.
That's interesting. That's interesting.
Yeah. What else have we got, Tom?
Well, this isn't Vermont, but it ties into Vermont because it's a farm that's digesting the farm excrement and making biomass.
Okay.
I'll bring the picture up.
There's, Vermont is big on that.
Well, yeah, we call it Cow Power, and Green Mountain Power has a program where people who are concerned can sign into the Cow Power program. They pay a little bit more for their power.
Yep.
And they're getting power that's the electrons aren't necessarily coming from the farms, but it's
Green Mountain Power is committed legally to supplying the amount of power that these people buy from renewable resources, which are not necessarily cows. And if they can't do it, then they have to expand in order to do it.
And by buying into this program, you're financing the program.
Right.
And giving incentive to the farmers
to
recover the energy in their biomass.
What is the price of power in the Green Mountain Power now? Is it 16 cents?
I don't know.
15 cents?
It's buried in my rent.
Well, it's not buried in my rent, and I think it's 16 cents. I might be wrong. It might be 15 cents, but I am paying 19 cents, and the reason is because 100% of my power comes from cow power.
So you're a Cow Power subscriber. Okay.
Right, 100%.
Now you're doing that.
Yeah.
Because you think it's the appropriate thing.
I think it's the appropriate thing to do. And I am in a position now where I am looking at the alternatives, which are ways to get solar power instead. And I think that solar power is enough cheaper than the cow power that I would save money. And of course, if I'm financing solar, that's cheaper for solar than if Green Mountain Power is financing solar.
Why they're doing it.
Yeah.
Well, this picture here is a farm. I think it's in Washington State. And what's interesting about it is the guy's been generating gas, methane gas, from his farm for many, many years.
Yeah.
And he's just found it's going to be cheaper for him to scrub that gas and sell it as gas rather than sell it as electricity.
Right.
Which kind of really surprises me.
Well, this is something that's happened in a number of places.
But we've got a picture on the right there is what a digester looks like. It's all underground. And it's not a great big vat. It's a maze of channels.
Really?
And the material, it flows through that in an orderly fashion, and as
Interesting.
it goes, different processes affect it.
This is different from the biodigesters I've seen in Vermont. It's interesting to see that.
You can't really see what it is, all underground.
No, that's right. Yeah.
But at least he's not throwing his waste in the river.
Still plugging away. Well, yeah, absolutely. But one of the lessons that I learn as I look at the news over and over and over and over again is that there are very few things that are waste that really are waste. And
eventually nothing will be waste.
Yeah, that's true.
In nature, there is no waste. Everything eats something, even the rocks. This is an interesting shot. This is.
That looks like The people, the guys on in
Mount Suribachi.
Mount Suribachi
That
putting up
wasn't
the
an
flag.
accident.
I'm sure it wasn't.
That was staged, but it's
Yeah.
still a good story.
Yeah.
Uh,
Are you saying this wasn't? This was.
Neither of them were staged. Both of them were staged.
Both of them were staged. Yes, I know. I knew the one on Suribachi was staged. I didn't know that this one was. But
Well, it has to be. It has to be.
How
It
could
just-
that
it
happen
just-
by accident?
It just is too reminiscent of Iwo
Yeah.
Jima.
But
what's
it would be
interesting
fun
about
if we could
this-
find out that it wasn't staged.
Oh, it was. It's known now that it was
Okay.
staged.
All right.
What's interesting about this is look at the size of that pole. It's only about 20, 25 feet.
Yes.
And a very small turbine.
Yes.
And all those other turbines in the background are all very, very small,
Yes.
too. So this is an island of Sumba
Sumba
in Indonesia.
in Indonesia.
It's an interesting thing in that it's a Christian island in a Muslim country.
Yeah, there are a few of those
But
down
one
there.
of the
as I
things
recall.
that as Christians they can do that the Muslims can't is they raise pigs.
And eat them, by
And
the
eat
way.
them, yes. They had, so the electricity had been produced by a hydro generator in the river. Small hydro generator. We've been using the river for our whole lives, but never knew it. Oh, the hydro generator is new.
It's
We've
new.
been using the river for our whole lives, we never knew it could give us electricity.
These are people who are just now getting electric power.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They're harnessing power from the sun, from the wind, as we see here, from rivers, and even pigdom.
There
They're
you
big
go.
to go, 100%
There's a
renewable
good
by
wa-
2025.
Good reason to raise pigs.
The project is called the Iconic Island, and it was started by a Dutch development organization, and it's now part of the government's strategy to almost double renewables in its energy mix over the next 10 years.
Yeah.
It's an impoverished island of mostly subsistence farmers and fishermen. And they're quoting now, somebody's quoting, since we started using electricity, so much has changed. The kids can study at night. I can weave baskets and mats for longer and sell more at the market. But only 30% of Sumba's 650,000 people, there's a lot of people,
Yeah.
have been hooked up to the power grid. More than 50% of the electricity used now on the island comes from renewable sources.
Wow.
Now it says here, Indonesia is the world's fourth most populous country. That's why there's 600,000 people.
Well, yeah, there's a lot of people living in Indonesia. There's no
More than
question about that.
250,000 people. And it's Southeast Asia's biggest economy.
250 million, you mean?
Yet it's one of the regions most poorly electrified, partly because it sprawls over 17,000 islands.
Well, again, we're back to this business of the islands.
Yeah.
If you've got an island, you've got to import power, or you've got to use sustainable power that comes on the island.
Yeah.
In almost every case, not every case, but you know, it's the cost of fossil fuels is going up worldwide. The cost of renewable power is going down, and of course, the first place that it penetrates is the place where fossil fuels cost the most, which is why we're seeing a lot of development in Hawaii.
Yes. Yeah. We don't have any fossil fuel.
They don't have much in the way of mineral resources at all.
Not much. No, we got a lot of coconuts, but
They have a lot of. They don't even have a lot of black sand. They did have some black sand, but
Yeah,
it
they have some, yeah.
keeps getting washed away.
I mentioned Fukushima.
Yes.
Fukushima.
Yeah.
I think Fukushima's a little closer to the way they pronounce it. But I'll pull them
The
up.
way that I've heard it is that the F, which has been represented in English in some cases by an H.
Uh-huh.
The F is actually about midway between an F and
Between
an
F and an H,
H,
right? I can believe
if you
that.
can imagine that combination.
Well, you may have read or heard they're trying to build frozen walls to contain the water,
Yeah.
and they're not sure that it's going to work.
Yep.
And it seems to me to be a Hail Mary pass.
It's what it sounds like. Yes.
But in any case, this is what it looks like. Those pipes you see there are bringing in frozen. Well, it's a coolant. I don't
Yes.
even know what it is, but it's 30 degrees below zero.
Below zero. Yeah.
And the frozen walls are intended to stem the flow of groundwater into the nuclear complex. But I just took the picture down because I thought it was interesting to see how they're trying to do it.
That looks expensive.
It's got to be expensive.
I mean, that has to surround
It's
the
gotta
complex.
be expensive.
That equipment has got to be not just, you know, the 50 or 60 feet you can see here, but something that goes all the way around the.
It's going all the way around. Yeah.
Yeah, which means it's got to be miles long.
Oh, this is a good one. We
Oh,
like
that's a
this
beautiful
one. We like
picture.
this
Put that
one.
up
This
so
is-
people
this
can
is
see
good.
it.
This is a, well, they call it a landmark hydro scheme that once illuminated a Scottish stately home when electric power was in its infancy.
Yes,
They discontinued it because it wasn't efficient compared to buying it from the grid.
yes.
And now they're putting it back up. And it looks very much like the micro hydro that we demonstrated on this show.
Yeah, that James Perkins had
Yeah.
from Little Green Hydro.
The
Yeah.
pioneering Victorian scheme has been reinvented for the 21st century using the latest renewable technology. It has helped a botanical garden near Peebles become the greenest botanical gardens in the UK. So it's a park now. And
Again, I think we're at a point here where this used to be an aristocrat's home, and now it's a park, and it is back to the business of somebody getting something for nothing. You know, and that's if I sound hopeful about this, it's because I am. I'm seeing. You know, I was talking to Roland when he was setting up the stage here, and he was talking about kind of wishing that, about some kind of charity being done in the past. And there was a lot of charity. But 140 years ago, roughly, somebody started the ASPCA. And people laughed at the guy who was the impetus behind this, because he was trying to prevent people from being cruel to animals. You know, the animals don't have any soul, they said.
Yeah,
Why does it matter? And I think the point that I'm making is that hopefully what I'm seeing is some kind of progress that humanity is making. I really think that we are making progress, despite what in the world is that?
finish your story and I'll bring this
I
one
don't
up.
want
This
to. I
is-
don't even want to know.
This is a goodie. This wasn't from one of your blogs, but it was linked. It was a link on one of your
Yeah.
blogs, and I looked it up and I just started laughing.
I hope they aren't being mean to that poor cow.
It
looks like they're being mean to the poor
It looks
cow.
like they're being mean to him, yeah. It is common knowledge that certain types of organic waste can be harnessed as energy sources. All right, this is a group in Argentina. A governmental research body has developed cow backpacks that trap the methane they produce in order to turn it into green energy.
By the way, you know, there's something that people seem to think is true, which is that cows pass a lot of gas, and that this is where the methane is, and it isn't. They belch it.
They belch it. That's
Comes out
exactly
through
right.
their
That's
mouth.
exactly- This does mention that because here's a picture on the right of the cow's rumen,
Yeah,
which is the first stomach.
yeah.
That's the esophagus there on the left.
Okay.
And this is where the gas is produced.
Right.
And they're trying to capture it there and collect it in that bag on top of the
Oh
cow.
man. Oh. Now, you know, one of the things that I read, and this goes back years, but the biggest greenhouse gas coming from India was methane from cows.
Mm-hmm.
These cows were belching a lot, and of course, India's got a huge cow population.
That they do. They wander the streets.
Yeah, and they're considered to be, to some degree, sacred.
Yeah.
Although I knew an Indian fellow who was a Hindu, and he in fact he was a Brahmin. And when I asked him about Hindus, he said, no, there are no Hindus except the Brahmins. But what about those other people? Oh, they do some popular religion. I don't even know what it's called. And he ate beef, and I asked him about it, and he said, oh, those cows are disgusting. At least in the United States you can eat the beef because the cows aren't disgusting. And I said, what is disgusting about it? They eat things like newspapers and garbage. Yeah, but their biggest greenhouse gas was methane from cows. Mm-hmm. That was a few years ago. My guess is that today it's probably carbon dioxide from coal. But
Well,
I
we'll go
might
back
be
to
wrong
that,
about
but
that.
they insert the, it doesn't say how they insert the tube,
Yeah.
but they anesthetize the cow to do it.
Ah,
So it's probably going down its throat.
yeah.
Because it's the first stomach. I mean,
Yeah,
otherwise
first
it's going to have to
stomach.
go through all of those miles and miles.
And
of
you'd have
intestines.
all kinds of, or through the side of the
maybe directly through
the side of the cow, but you'd have all kinds of problems with infections and things like that. It would make sense to put it down the
Here's another
cow's
one that's
throat.
interesting.
I still feel sorry for the cow.
The Salton Sea. The Salton Sea is a desert.
Yes.
It's in Southern California.
And
It's
it's
a
not-
very large desert.
It's not even supposed to be a sea.
Not
but-
even supposed to have water in it, right? It's something like 1927. The Colorado River overflowed its banks.
Yeah.
And there's been water there ever since.
Yeah.
Although in prehistoric times it was water.
Yeah.
Now it's a very shallow salt lake.
Right.
But underneath it, there's geothermal potential.
Right.
Quite a bit of it.
Yes.
And it's not magma, it's hot rocks.
Right.
And this is a picture. This is actually working. That's steam. It's not gases, it's not pollution, but it's steam coming
It's just
from
steam.
the geothermal in the Salton Sea. And they're starting to develop it as much as they can. And the only downside of it is it involves something very similar to fracking.
Yes, and it can cause earthquakes, and I know
can
that there was one of these things. It's called hydro shearing. There was a geothermal plant in Switzerland that they put the plant into production, and then they said, okay, sorry, gonna have to shut it down
Yeah.
because it was causing earthquakes. It was very near Basel, and the people don't like earthquakes.
Well, I think they're kind of inconvenient at times.
Yeah.
Kind of inconvenient at times. This one's a little bit closer to home. I'll try to pull it up here. This is Dartmouth, Mass.
Oh, okay.
And you've probably been aware, I think we talked about it here, a lot of the little towns in Massachusetts are
Yep.
going renewable.
I remember when this item came up in the news, as a matter of fact. Go ahead, Tom.
Well, I think this came out of one of your items. So
Yeah.
it's now the top producer of solar energy statewide. That's a picture of a solar farm in Dartmouth, Mass.
Yep.
I think that's a silo. I'm not sure what it is.
It's
That
not,
structure there.
pretty sure it's not connected with the solar power operation.
I don't think it has anything to do with the solar power. I think it's a silo on a farm. But you
Yeah.
can see what looks like a lake in the background is the solar panels.
Yep.
You know, the town has a total of 177 solar projects. Well, a lot of that's rooftop.
Yes.
And it's producing 26.7 megawatts of energy. Why did they say 25?
It would be interesting to know how much the power produced annually is and how much the town uses.
Let's see if I've got that here. I think I might have that here. It's twice as big as the amount produced in Rentham, which is in second place.
Yes.
They currently have 6 working solar farms and 2 more on the way, and more than 100 commercial and residential solar projects. That's rooftop solar.
Yep.
The town signed a 20-year contract with 2 of the farms and is already reaping the benefits and revenues. The town's making money for this.
Yep.
Well, we're almost out of the second hour.
Yeah, we sure
I
are.
just wanted to show this picture.
Oh, that's a beautiful.
Just
picture.
because it's a
Let's put
pretty
it up.
picture.
Yeah. That's a pretty picture.
And what it is, it's a place in Wyoming,
Yep.
and they're going to be building a wind farm there,
Yep.
and they're going to ship that power to California.
Yes, I've been reading about this. This place is huge.
It's going to feature 1,000 turbines.
1,000 turbines. And how big are the turbines?
I'm not sure it tells me that.
Well, it seems to me this is something over 3 gigawatts.
But look at those mountains. Aren't they pretty?
They are very pretty.
And I can't say since those mountains are so stately, that they're going to be destroyed by a few turbines.
They're not.
Even if there's 1,000 of them.
Well, they're not putting the turbines on the mountains.
No.
They're
They're
putting
on that field.
They're putting them on
They're
that
going
field.
on that field.
Yeah.
No, they're not going to be on the mountains.
Yeah.
But it's a pretty picture. And I
It
guess
is.
We
It's
can
beautiful.
use that as our sign off.
Sign off. Signing off. Goodbye, everybody. I hope that you have an enjoyable week. And
There's my mouse.
there's your mouse.
Goodbye, everybody.
Goodbye, everybody. See you next time.